any other. I'd been hauling a load of farm equipment across the country. My route was long and desolate, stretching the dark, empty roads of West Texas. I loved those long stretches of highway. Just me, the hum of my engine, and the quiet isolation. I planned to drive through the night to make my deadline. The Halloween air had a chill, but nothing compared to the eerie silence that started falling around me. Around midnight, I pulled into a tiny old gas station to fuel up and grab a coffee. There wasn't much to the place. A couple of flickering lights, a gas pump that looked like it hadn't been upgraded since the 80s, and a small convenience store with barely any lighting. As I filled my tank, I felt something strange. It was hard to explain, but it felt like I was being watched. I looked around. No cars, no people. Just empty land, stretching in every direction. I brushed it off as Halloween jitters, paid for the gas, and got back on the road. A few miles out, I noticed something in the distance. It was a figure standing by the roadside. Just standing there, not hitchhiking. I drove past. It was gone. Nothing rode behind me. I told myself it was nothing, just some guy on the side of the road. But I knew that wasn't normal. The way he stood, how he watched me. No, that wasn't right. I drove on, but my truck started acting up. The engine, which had been smooth as ever, suddenly began to sputter. My dashboard lights flickered, and the radio cut out entirely. I couldn't shake the thought of that man, and as the night grew darker, the air inside the cab turned cold, unnaturally cold. I cranked up the heat, but it barely made a difference. Then, out of nowhere, the radio clicked back on. But it wasn't music or static. It was breathing. Deep, heavy breathing coming through the speakers. My stomach knotted up. I turned the volume down, but the breathing got louder, filling the cab, filling my head. I pulled over, heart pounding, and shut off the engine, hoping that would stop it. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by the soft creaking of my truck settling. I sat there for a moment, trying to catch my breath, and that's when I felt it. A presence, like someone was sitting in the passenger seat. Slowly I turned to look, dreading what I might see. But the seat was empty. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived, because in the rearview mirror, I saw something. Just a shadow, faint but unmistakable, in the back of my cab. It was shaped like a person, crouched low, watching me. I whipped around to look directly. Nothing. Just the darkness of my empty sleeper cab. I knew I should have left right then, but the rational part of me kept arguing it was just a trick of the light. I started the truck back up and got back on the road. The engine hummed, the cab warmed up, and the radio played music again. I tried to focus on the drive, on getting through the night, but my eyes kept drifting to the rearview mirror. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The next hour passed in strained silence. Every now and then, I'd feel that chill again, or see a fleeting shadow in the mirror. Finally, I thought I'd managed to outrun whatever was haunting me when, in the distance, I saw another figure, standing by the road. It looked like the same man from earlier. My skin prickled as I passed him, keeping my eyes straight ahead, but I felt his gaze burning through me. A mile later, he was gone. I glanced back, and the road was empty. Then came the sound. Tap, tap, tapping, coming from the cab behind me. I told myself it was just something loose, but the tapping grew louder, more insistent. I gripped the wheel tight, refusing to look back, until I heard a voice, a low, gravelly whisper that seemed to slip through the air like fog. Need a ride? whispered, chilling me to the bone. My blood ran cold. I hadn't spoken to anyone since the gas station, and there was no one else around. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and kept my eyes on the road. I didn't answer, didn't acknowledge it, but the voice came again, closer this time. Need a ride? I glanced at the passenger seat. For a split second, I saw him. The man from the roadside, sitting right there next to me, face hidden beneath the dark hood. I slammed on the brakes, my truck sitting halt in the middle of the road. My heart was racing, and I was shaking so badly I could barely breathe. The seat was empty. The man was gone. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, he was there, crouched in the back of my cab, grinning. His eyes were like holes, black and empty, staring right in my soul. I turned around to face him, but once again, there was nothing. At that point, I knew I couldn't keep driving. I couldn't outrun this thing, whatever it was. I pulled over and grabbed my flashlight, stepping out of the cab into the night. The air was still, deathly quiet. Something, anything that might explain what was happening. As I reached the back of the trailer, I saw it. Scratched into the metal were words, rough and jagged, like they'd been clawed in with bare hands. Need a ride. My flashlight flickered, and the temperature dropped even further. I turned to get back in the truck, but something stopped me. I felt a hand on my shoulder, cold, bony fingers that gripped me like a vice. I froze, heart pounding, barely daring to breathe. Slowly I turned, expecting to see him, but there was no one there. I looked around, shining the flashlight into the shadows, but all I found was silence. I climbed back into the cab, locked the doors, and sat there, trembling, gripping the steering wheel like it was my lifeline. For the next hour, I drove in silence, refusing to look anywhere but at the road. But that chill, that presence, it never left. Every so often, I'd hear a whisper, faint and raspy, like it was coming from the very air around me. Need a ride. By the time the sun started to rise, I felt like I'd aged 10 years. The weight of the night hung heavy on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I barely escaped with my life. I pulled into a truck stop just as the first dawn crept over the horizon. I stumbled out of the cab, exhausted, and sat down on a bench, rubbing my temples, trying to make sense of what had happened. An old-timer, another trucker, noticed me and came over, asking if I was all right. I didn't know what to tell him, so I just shrugged and muttered something about a rough night. He gave me a knowing look and nodded, then leaned in close. "Was it the man on the road?" he asked, voice low. I stared at him, caught off guard. "You've seen him?" He nodded slowly, eyes dark. "I saw him once, years ago, on a Halloween night, just like this. Stopped to help a man on the roadside, but he wasn't right. Looked like a normal fella, but his eyes, they were empty, like he'd been gone a long time." It settled on me. He went on. "People say he's the ghost of a hitchhiker out here, longing for a ride, someone to keep him company on these lonely..."
Hello? Yeah?
Hey man, they just canceled us. If you can go to the truck stop and wait there a little bit, I don't know, probably let's give it a shot for like, I don't know, 2 hours, 3 hours.
They canceled, huh?
They just called, so they sent the right confirmation, we signed it, but it's already.
Oh, we got it. They didn't cancel. So where about is it? Oh, so we did not get the load? Alright, if it goes too long, then you know I'm just going to start heading out. Alright, thanks, Octavian. Alright, bye.
But once he's in your cab, he don't plan on leaving. I sat trying to process what he'd told me. Eventually, I got back in my truck and finished my route. The highways late at night, and you see a man by the roadside. Halloween night has another date on the calendar for me. I'm not one for spooky movies or dressing up, and my life behind the wheel as a long-haul trucker has had enough bumps in the night without any ghosts or goblins. But last Halloween, I'll never look at an empty highway the same way again. It started with an unexpected run. My dispatcher had called me up late in the day with a rush job, a delivery that needed to get from Dallas to Albuquerque by morning. I wasn't thrilled, but money's money. The first few hours passed in the typical Halloween hush, the kind you get on nights when the world seems asleep. But around 1 o'clock a.m., I saw something that made me question my own mind.
Good morning, Stephanie.
I was driving through one of those stretches in western Texas.
Finally got the load
where you
off.
could see nothing but flat land for miles. No lights, no houses, just the cold asphalt stretching into
Got
the
here,
dark.
got here in the afternoon
I
and
squinted ahead
enjoyed
at what
my
looked
time
like a
off.
figure standing by the roadside.
now I'm going to go over to the
I
truck
thought
stop
it was a trick of my tired eyes, but as I got closer,
and wait.
I saw it was real. A man, wearing what looked like an old, dust-covered coat, standing just beyond the shoulder of the road. His head was down, and he was just standing there, staring at the ground. I
Where's
slowed
my
down
dot,
slightly,
damn it?
wondering if he was in some kind of trouble, but something in the pit of my stomach told me to keep moving. As I drove past, he didn't move, didn't even flinch,
Okay,
just stayed still, watching the ground like it held the answer to everything.
okay,
I felt his
navigate.
presence linger long after I'd left him behind. I shook it off. After all, it's not unusual to see a hitchhiker or two out in the middle of nowhere. But about 15 minutes later, I saw him again,
Well, there.
standing on the side of the same guy. I'd been moving fast, and there could have caught up.
Stupid
But
speed
as I
bumps.
approached, I recognized him. Same coat, same posture, like he was frozen in place. This time, I sped up, my foot pressing hard on the gas. I wasn't about to stop for anyone on a night like this. But as I glanced back in my mirror, I thought I saw him raise his head, just slightly, as if he were watching me drive away. His eyes, they were black, darker than any eyes I'd ever seen, like they were hollow, empty. For the next hour, my nerves were stretched thin. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that the miles and the night were getting to me. But around 3 o'clock a.m., the air in my cab turned cold. Not just chilly, but bone deep, unnatural cold. I reached to turn up the heat, but the dial wouldn't budge, like it was stuck. Then, the radio crackled to life. At first, it was just static, which wasn't all that unusual in the middle of nowhere. But then, through the crackling, I started hearing words. Soft, whispered words, like someone was muttering right behind me. Help. Me. The voice was
Masturbate.
faint, hoarse, like it was being choked out. I reached out, fumbling for the volume knob, my heart racing. I wanted to shut it off, but my hand was trembling so badly that I couldn't get a grip. The voice continued, barely more than a whisper. Why didn't you stop? It sent a chill down my spine. I couldn't breathe. The voice was accusing, desperate, and it felt like it was crawling into my head, making a home there. Finally, I managed to switch off the radio, and silence fell over the cab again. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm my nerves. I was almost convinced it was just my mind playing tricks on me, the product of too little sleep and too much caffeine. But then I saw him again. This time, he was standing in the middle of the road, directly in my path. I slammed on the brakes, tires screeching as I came to a hard stop. The figure didn't move. He just stood there, head down, that same dusty coat hanging off his thin frame. I honked, trying to scare him off the road, but he didn't budge. He lifted his head slowly, those empty black eyes locking onto mine. I could feel his gaze piercing right through me, a weight that pressed down on my chest. I don't know what possessed me, but I rolled down the window just a crack and shouted, "Get out of the road!" His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I leaned out just a little, trying to make out what he was saying. His voice floated through the night, a low, hollow whisper, "Take me with you." Every instinct in me screamed to get out of there, but something about his words pinned me in place. My truck idled, headlights illuminating his face, and I saw that his skin was pale, almost gray, like he'd been drained of life. He took a step toward me, one slow, shuffling step, his dark eyes fixed on mine. I couldn't move,
Why do people do that?
couldn't breathe.
Just
It
cut
was
in
like
front
he
of a
had some
semi-truck.
kind of hold
Really?
on me, a grip that tightened with every step he took. Just as he was about to reach the cab, the lights of an oncoming vehicle appeared in the distance, breaking the spell. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, tearing past him, the truck roaring down the highway as I left him in the dust. But that wasn't the end of it. I was only a few miles out of Albuquerque when the temperature inside the cab dropped again, so cold that I could see my breath misting in the air. My windows started fogging up, the glass frosted over, and a foul stench filled the cab, like rotting meat. The radio crackled to life on its own, and that voice came back, louder this time, accusing, furious. "Why did you leave me?" I shouted back at the radio, desperate to make it stop. "I don't know you. Just leave me alone." But the voice only grew louder, more insistent. "You left me. Why didn't you help?" The radio fizzed, then blared static so loud I had to
I
cover
would
my
have said
ears.
because I don't have to.
It was like the air itself was alive with anger, with something clawing its way into my head. I was ready to ditch the truck and just run, but then everything stopped. Silence fell, sudden and absolute. I glanced around, my heart pounding. The windows had cleared, the stench was gone, and the radio was dead silent. I let out a shaky breath, thinking it was over. But as I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw him sitting in the back of my cab. His face was barely visible in the dim light, but those eyes, those empty, soulless eyes, stared back at me through the mirror. I screamed, turning to face him. But when I looked back, he was gone. The cab was empty. I didn't stop until I reached the outskirts of Albuquerque. I pulled into a rest area, still shaking, and stumbled out of the truck, desperate for fresh air. The lot was empty except for one of me, and nodded, like he understood. "Long night?" he asked, his voice rough. I nodded, too shaken to answer. He gestured to the empty space beside him. "Come sit a spell. You look like you've seen a ghost." I let out a hollow laugh, sinking down onto the bench. After a few moments, he spoke again, voice low. "Seen him, haven't you?" I glanced over at him, confused. "Who?" "The hitchhiker. Man with the dusty coat, dark eyes. The one you didn't stop for." My blood ran cold. I hadn't mentioned a word to him, hadn't told anyone. But he just nodded, like he'd been waiting for me to say something. They say he was a trucker once, just like us. Got stranded on Halloween night years ago, froze to death waiting for someone to pick him up. I stared at him, heart hammering. And now he waits. The old-timer said, voice barely a whisper. He waits for someone to give him a ride, to take him wherever he's going. I didn't ask any more questions. I couldn't. I thanked the old man and stumbled back to my truck, every part of me aching to leave that place behind. As I climbed into the cab, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see those dark eyes staring back at me. But the cab was empty.
Go!
The road stretched ahead, empty
Go!
and dark. But I couldn't
I'm
shake
going
the
that
feeling
way.
that he was still out there, waiting.
Stupid.
Every Halloween since, I've stayed off the roads, holed up in a cheap motel or a rest area, anywhere but the highway. Because now, every time I see a figure on the roadside, I can't help but wonder, if I stopped, would he finally leave me alone? Or would he just be the first of many to follow me? A silent passenger I can never leave behind. So, because once you let him in, you'll never be alone again. Halloween night was just another day on the road for me, or at least I thought it would be. I had been driving trucks for over a decade, and a late night haul didn't scare me. I was used to the loneliness, the quiet, the long hours with nothing but static on the radio and the hum of the road. But that Halloween night,
Where to go, dum-dum? Walk behind a semi-truck that's going backwards.
on, but they didn't do much to cut through the haze. Every now and then, I'd see movement on the roadside, something small and quick, darting into the shadows. Just desert animals, I told myself. I'd seen them plenty of times before. But after midnight, things took a strange turn. My radio, which had been playing nothing but static, suddenly clicked over to an old country station I didn't recognize. It was playing some ghostly tune, slow and mournful, like the kind you'd hear in a honky-tonk back in the 70s. The singer's voice was rough, full of sorrow, and somehow it felt like it was directed right at me. I turned the dial, trying to change the station, but it was stuck. I fiddled with it a bit, and the volume crackled, then died completely, leaving me in silence. That's when I saw the diner. It appeared out of nowhere, sitting right by the side of the road. Neon lights flickered on the roof, casting an eerie green glow. The sign read, "Last Stop," with a couple of letters half burnt out, giving it a sinister look. I slowed down, surprised. I had driven this route countless times and had never seen this place before. I almost kept driving, but my stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since I'd left the last truck stop hours back, and I figured a quick bite couldn't hurt. I pulled into the lot, cut the engine, and stepped out. The night was silent, too silent, and the mist seemed to curl around the diner, giving it an otherworldly feel. The lights buzzed above me as I walked up to the entrance. I noticed the windows were dark, and I didn't see anyone inside, but the neon sign was on, so I picked
Sap Brothers.
but now it was slower, distorted, like the record was warping. My unease grew, and I glanced at the door, planning my escape. But before I could move, he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Did you see her?" I blinked, caught off guard. "See who?" "The woman on the side of the road. She waits out there, hoping someone will stop. But they never do." His gaze darkened, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Or maybe they can't." The lights flickered, and a sudden chill swept through the diner. I shivered, my mind racing. I hadn't seen any woman on the road, just animals darting in the shadows. But something about his words chilled me to the core, like he was speaking some terrible truth. "I think I should get going," I said, standing up. But as I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm. His grip was icy, his fingers digging into my skin. "She'll find you," he whispered, his face inches from mine. "They all do, eventually." I pulled my arm free and backed away, heart racing. The door loomed ahead, and I didn't waste a second. I practically ran out of the diner, back into the foggy night, my breath visible in the cold air. I climbed into my truck, started the engine, and pulled out of that lot as fast as I could, my hands shaking on the wheel. For the first few miles, I kept glancing in my mirrors, half expecting to see that man, or whoever she was. But the road was empty, just the mist curling around the edges of my headlights. I tried to calm down, telling myself it was just some creepy drifter trying to spook me. But then, about 20 minutes later, I saw her. She was standing on the side of the road, her figure barely visible through the mist. She wore a long white dress that looked torn and stained, hanging loosely from her thin frame. Her hair fell over her face, hiding her features, but I could feel her eyes on me. Cold, desperate eyes, staring right through the windshield. I swerved, trying to keep my eyes on the road, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there, following me, somehow keeping up with my speed. I gripped the wheel tight, knuckles white, refusing to look back. And then, the radio crackled on again. "Why didn't you stop?" Her voice, soft and broken, filled the cab. I nearly jumped out of my seat, slapping at the radio to turn it off, but it wouldn't budge. Her voice grew louder, more insistent. "Why didn't you stop for me?" I shouted at the radio, begging it to stop. But her voice only grew louder, filling the cab until it felt like it was inside my head. The truck swerved, and I barely managed to keep it on the road. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the radio fell silent. I was shaking, drenched in sweat, but I forced myself to keep driving, desperate to leave that place behind. But no matter how far I went, the mist never lifted. It was like I was trapped in a loop, the same stretch of road repeating itself over and over. Finally, as dawn began to break, the mist started to thin. Relief washed over me, but as the first light of day hit my windshield, I looked over to my passenger seat. She was there, sitting beside me, her face pale and gaunt, eyes wide with sorrow. She didn't say anything, didn't move, just watched me with that same haunting stare. I screamed, slamming on the brakes, and when I blinked, she was gone. The seat was empty, as if she'd never been there. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town, and even then, I barely had the courage to step out of the truck. I asked the locals about the diner, the one called Last Stop, but no one had heard of it. There was no diner on that stretch of highway, they told me. There hadn't been for years, not since a fire had burned down an old roadside cafe in the late 70s, taking a young waitress with it. They said she'd died waiting for a ride home. Every Halloween since, I've stayed off the road, keeping my wheels parked until the dawn breaks, and that haunted night is gone. Because now, when I see a figure on the roadside, a glimpse of white in the mist, I know better. I keep my eyes on the road, my foot steady on the gas, and I don't look back. Halloween night has never been anything special to me, just another shift on the open road. After 15 years in the trucking business, I'm not spooked by much. Not midnight drives, not empty stretches of highway, not even eerie little towns that seem to materialize out of the dark. But last Halloween night, I encountered something out on Dead Man's Pass that shook me to my core. Even now, I can hardly bring myself to talk about it. My route that night took me along a narrow, winding highway through the mountains, a route known for its dangerous switchbacks and sheer drops. There was no shoulder for miles in either direction, just rock on one side and a steep fall-off on the other. The route earned its grim nickname, Dead Man's Pass, from the number of accidents that had happened there over the years, especially in the dead of night. I picked up a load in California earlier that day and was bound for Utah. Everything was on schedule until the sun started.
Where's... You. No, I'm good. I'll pass.
Did you know having a brain can cause brain cancer? Thank God you're safe. Did you know?
Yes, can I get a large iced coffee?
Can I get a cookie?
We have cookies at home, sweetheart.
We have coffee at home.
Chocolate chip or sugar? And a sugar cookie, please? Yes, can I get...
No transform.
Question of the day. What's the difference between a woman in the bath and a woman in church? Well, one has hope in her soul, the other has soap in her hole. Question of the day. What's the difference between a woman in the bath and a woman in church? Well, one has hope in her soul, the other has soap in her hole. Question of the day. What's the difference between a woman in the bath and a woman in church? Well, one has hope in her soul, the other has soap in her hole. Question of the day. What's the difference between a woman in the bath and a woman in church? Question of the day.
Coming to me and my brother for about every other day. She goes, did I raise y'all in a barn? Coming to me and my brother for about every other day. She goes, did I raise y'all in a barn? I go, no. My brother would start laughing. She'd go, what's so funny? He'd say, nothing. Coming to me and my brother friend about every other day. She'd go, did I?
Okay, so get this. You make 10 meals, you're not a cook. You make 20 paintings, you're not an artist. But you kill one person. Okay, so get
Asking AI to make a hit country song called Country Cowboy Rocket.
secret Mitus in my heart, but baby, I ain't done. Gonna lay down in the country grass and shine it at the sun. Then I'll crack myself a nice ice cold 2-liter Diet Coke. And when I mix it with the Mitus, I'll be flying over folks.
What do you call a ghost spooks? Paranormal entities. What do you call a ghost spooks? Paranormal entities.
Paranormal titties.
What do you call a ghost spooks? Paranormal entities. What do you call a ghost spooks? Paranormal entities.
Have you ever thought to yourself, I had a pretty cool treehouse growing up?
Nice.
Just look at it, cab over Peterbilt treehouse. Have you ever thought to yourself, I had a pretty cool treehouse growing up? That is the coolest. Just look at it, cab over Peterbilt treehouse. Have you ever thought to yourself, I had a bar unique sauce containers? Get 1 finger at a time.
Yum.
2 fingers.
Okay.
And then, if everybody's cool with it, work up to 3.
No. Just good. Now.
I'll take what I can get.
If my friends aren't around, I'll just finger blast myself.
Nice! Nice! Rude. Some new sauces at once.
That's a shocker. Airboxing is the best.
Our unique sauce containers. Get 1 finger at a time.